Born Before 64 is a TV show that asks the vital question, what will we do for the rest of our lives? Kathryn Raaker hosts a show for baby boomers and above, inviting real people to tell real stories about overcoming issues, about facing with courage and triumph the significant obstacles many of us face every day. So let's join Kathryn Raaker for Born Before 64.
Hi, I'm Kathryn Raaker of Born Before 64, and we're on a special mission today, and that's a space mission. We are actually in Melbourne, Florida, very close to the Kennedy Space Center, and we are with a scientist who happens to be a friend of mine from Australia. And her name is Kim Ellis. She is a scientist who's been in the field for many years. She's an entrepreneur. She has her own company. She's a wife and a mother. And she also makes jewelry. So she's really a full-rounded person. I want to introduce you to our audience, and why are we here in Melbourne, Florida? Can you tell me?
Well, hi, Kathryn.
That's all right, go ahead.
The International Space University runs a space studies program once a year in a different country.
Okay.
And I'm here on an Australian Government Endeavour Award placement for the summer to work as the academic coordinator's assistant.
And you're getting paid for it as well.
Yes,
right?
Yes. So it's an amazing professional development opportunity. And I first was introduced to the International Space University 2 years ago when I received a scholarship from the university to come and study in France, where they held their space studies program in 2010 as one of the participants. So I became one of about 130 people from 30 different countries who lived and worked and studied in France at the actual home campus of the university for 9 weeks. We completed a research project, we completed department activities, and we did over 60 hours of lectures on everything that you'd want to know about space.
Now, one of the things that amazes me is that we have some synergy between us. Both of our husbands are in the aeronautical world.
Yeah.
At GE.
Yeah.
And you met my husband, and your husband met my husband many years ago, or a few years ago.
Yeah.
And that's how we met. And we've been Skyping for probably almost 2 years now.
Yeah, it's a while. It might even be longer.
Right. And we've been doing different things with both of our companies in finding distribution for all kinds of minerals and products and everything else. But, you know, when I was a little girl, I was very interested in space and science myself. So when did this all occur in your life? Let's go back in time so that the audience gets a real feel for what Kim Ellis is really all about.
Well, I've always been interested in the world around me. I guess that's why I became a scientist,
right.
Because scientists want to know why. You don't know why you want to know why, you just want to know. And so I pursued science. When I finished school, I got a traineeship in Australia with BHP Billiton at the steelworks, and I trained on the job to be an industrial chemist. And what that means is that we analysed everything from the steel that was being produced to the environmental emissions to the products that go into making steel. And so I learnt in the lab how to be a scientist. So that's quality control in manufacturing. I then went to work for Rio Tinto in Melbourne in their research labs and learnt how new and novel processes were developed for different mining concentrates. So Rio Tinto, we looked at new minerals that they were doing their exploration. They'd bring in the sample, and there might be something different about that sample in that there was more of one mineral than there normally would be for that type of thing, and so we would develop a new technique for analysis and for processing. So we would build like a mini mining plant or a pilot plant for the chemical process, and we would test it. We'd do it on bench scale, then we'd do a tenth scale, and then we'd do big scale, and then they would implement those procedures out at the mines to process materials.
All right, faster, more efficiently, is that why?
Well, not just faster and more efficiently, but also reducing impacts on environment, because mining companies are very aware of making sure that they minimise their impact on the environment.
Let me ask this question, because there's been so many mining accidents and there's been so many miners that have black lung, especially here in the United States. Did that come into your project in your studies?
A lot of the things that came into our studies were reducing the impacts, so that if we could, for example, if you're processing material, if you could substitute a less toxic chemical to process it, we would test things like that. So we would use something that wasn't as toxic. So, for example, in gold mining, cyanide's used to get the gold out of the material.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that's quite toxic, and so disposal of that type of thing, there were a lot of studies done on that to minimise how that was worked on. And we worked on a project where we had bacteria that were breaking down the cyanide, so it then became harmless in the environment. So it's things like that, they're the kinds of projects that I've worked on for my whole career.
Now, you started when you were 5 as a science.
You remember? I
remember this. You started making little pies out of mud and water, and mud pies is what started your, fascination with how things happen in the Earth's surface and whatever. So, I remember when I was in high school, I did all the science projects, and tornadoes were my kind of thing to do. And the other night when we were out and it looked like it was tornadic weather, you were going, what's going on here? And I went, that looks like a tornado funnel cloud. We should move.
And I went, no way.
No way. You don't want to do that, right? So, that part of science is the one that excites me, is weather patterns and how weather affects and everything else. I mean, I was so excited, and I hate to say this, when the tsunami happened, but I was actually physically there in the areas where the tsunami occurred, so it means a lot more to you. But the destruction of that was unbelievable. Right?
It's incredible.
I know. So that, while you were actually working, you were going to university, and you call it something different, don't you? What's the term that you use for university?
Oh, it's still university.
Yeah, but you call it uni.
Yeah.
So it's learning a new language from Australia this week.
Yeah,
right?
It's Australian English, not
Australian English,
not American
not
English.
British English, and not American English. But
That's
we're
right.
kind of all together because we were part of the colonies.
Oh, absolutely. And
right?
Australia, there's been such a big development in Australia, and it wasn't until I started studying law, which, as you know, I've gone back to university to study law, and don't hold that against me.
We'll try not to.
And I'm in my final year now, and I didn't realise how everything clicked together so well in terms of, Australia brought the legal system from England.
Right.
And Australia actually didn't become independent from England until like the 1980s, where there was still an appeal to the Privy Court, and it's really opened my eyes to how close linked we all are.
Right. So, and that's so important. I'd like to give your website, because we're going to be talking when we come back from the break all about how you became redundant and how this whole thing happened with the space and technology situation and where you're going in tomorrow. So we need to have your website. Can you give that to us?
Yes, www.earthspacetech.com.
And on that note, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back on Born Before 64 with Kim Ellis.